Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. It is the Monday edition of the big radio show. The weekend vanishing into the rearview mirror. It was a fast one. I'll tell you that for nothing. Lots of stuff going on. Lots of stuff happened over the weekend, which we're going to get into today in hour two. We'll be hitting a lot of the headlines and talking about a lot of the things that are going on across the state and across the country. Meanwhile, in hour one, we're going to be joined by Joshua Church, who is a candidate for lieutenant governor. He's going to be joining us this morning. He is running on the ticket with David Bronson, and we're going to talk with him about the most important things facing the state of Alaska here in the next few years, to get his take on positions and topics and everything else that need to be talked about here as we get into it. This is the beginning of the busy season. Not only are we faced with a fractious legislative session, what I expect to be one of the more interesting legislative sessions of my lifetime. But also, of course, we have the gubernatorial race, which is a crowded field now of 15 candidates, 15 with the addition last week of the candidate up down here from Gasilov jumping into the race. So it should be it's going to be an interesting. I kept saying, it's the old saying of "May you live in interesting times," and somebody reminded me the other day that that's actually not a proverb but a curse. And so anyway, we're there. We're living it. We're ready to go. Getting ready to jump into it. On Wednesday, we'll have another lieutenant governor candidate. Mike Shower will be joining us in the second hour. Of course, tomorrow will be Brad Keithley and Chris Story. And we'll continue. Current temperature 35 degrees down here on top of the world in Homer, Alaska. 19 in the Mat-Su, at 19 to 25, depending on where you're at in the Mat-Su, and more. So warmed up quite a bit. I mean, I don't want to be that guy, but maybe we're out of the worst of it for winter. Of course, now that I said that, it'll be 47 below down here in Homer, for the first time ever. All right. Well, let's get to it. We're not gonna put this off anymore. Time to jump into it and get things ready to rock and roll. Joining us right now is Joshua Church, who is running for lieutenant governor on the Dave Bronson ticket. And he joins us this morning to discuss, a little bit of everything. And that is right now. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Loving your virtual donuts here and virtual coffee.
Exactly. Virtual donuts, virtual coffee. It's what we offer to every guest, no matter what. 0 calories, all the taste, none of the guilt. That's what it's all about. All right. Well, go ahead.
That was Rob Myers who told you it was a curse the other day.
Yeah, it was Rob Myers. I think that's right. He was the one that told me that it was a curse, not a proverb, which, I guess it all depends on how you look at it, Well, let's get started, Josh, before we dive down deep into the policy weeds, so to speak. Let's talk a little bit about you, Joshua Church. Give us, who you are, where you come from, a little bit of background, the origin story here, as it were.
Sure. So I'm married. I have 3 kids. Hopefully, we'll make it through this interview without any kids waking up and screaming. My youngest is 3 months old, and my oldest is a 5-year-old. I'm from Alaska. I was born in Wasilla. My family's third generation Alaskan, so we moved up here from Wisconsin in the 30s and started farming and working on the base and the railroad and stuff like that. So my family ties go back a long ways. I left Alaska, traveled around the world. My dad did a little bit of mission work in the Philippines for 4 years, and we lived in Oregon for a while. We came back to Alaska, and then I joined the military, did 9 years in the military, in the Marine Corps, reconnaissance and special operations community, and then returned back to Alaska again in 2016. So I've been back here for the last 10 years, where after the military, finished my degree at UAF and started a construction company and got into real estate development, which is what my family did. My dad had a construction company for years, so I grew up building houses. That's how I paid my way through college the first time until I dropped out and joined the Marine Corps. So when I came back, I finished college, and then after just running construction and real estate development for a few years, I got into investment management. So for the last 5 years, I've been a registered investment advisory rep with Arbor Capital.
Okay. And I guess my first question that I love to ask many first-time people who are running for office is, when exactly did you lose your mind? What
Yeah, that's a great question.
Was it a single thing? Was a straw that broke the camel's back? Was it cumulative? What caused you to decide to attempt to leave the private sector and join the circus there?
I told a friend of mine, I must be crazy, for a midlife crisis. I'm 39, so for a midlife crisis, seems like a Corvette or something would have been cheaper, more fun maybe. But he said it was actually a brilliant move because there's only 2 professions where a almost 40, almost about to be over the hill guy can say that they're young again, and that's ham radio and politics. So I'm still a member of the Young Republicans Club here. But in seriousness to your question, I have been lightly involved with politics and community stuff since I was a young kid. My brother was involved. He dragged me to Frank Murkowski sign waving events and stuff like that. But I didn't take it very seriously. It wasn't something I had any interest in. It was more something that he did. The process was a slow process for me, and it began when I was in the Marine Corps. We went to Sangin, Afghanistan in 2010. If your listeners will remember, in 2010, we've been in Afghanistan for 10 years. Well, it became apparent to me within a few months of being there that we were not going to win this war. And so I began to wonder what our leaders were doing wrong or not understanding that we were in a war for 10 years that anybody on the ground knew pretty early we were going to lose. When I returned home to Alaska after 9 years in the Marine Corps, I began to get involved in my local community. I got on boards, the member advisory board for GVA and Animal Control Committee and different boards over the years, the finance committee boards of the borough and the city, just trying to help out. But what I observed was some of the same questions I had when I was in the military with national policy. Is we were bickering about some of the same issues. We're being disingenuous about how to solve them. And for the last 10 years, nothing has gotten done. We have not moved the state forward. In fact, I would argue we're moving the state sort of on a path of managed decline. Fairbanks population is down substantially over the last 10 years. Anchorage has dwindled down too. And you see people, they can't afford the cost of living anymore. People are moving out because the schools aren't producing a good enough result. So there's just one thing after another, and watching for 10 years in Alaska as we follow the same path that our country has on the national level, with just politicians not doing the job that they're sent to do, just bickering and not getting it done, right? So my interest is in making this state the great community for my kids that it was for me and my parents and my grandparents. So I view this as a community service. When Dave Bronson asked me to run, me and my wife said no. But eventually I came around to a yes, because I felt sort of compelled. If I can help him make a difference in the state, then that's what I'm going to do.
It, as you said, we seem to be repeating a lot of the things over and over and over again in the state of Alaska, where we've had great opportunities, and to many people's minds, those opportunities have been either squandered or not fully exploited to the maximum yield to the citizens of the state of Alaska. As you look at it, and you look at the state, and you again look at your reasoning for jumping into the race and everything, what are the biggest challenges? We've got about 3 minutes here. So what is the biggest challenges that the state is facing here in this next, let's just say, 4-year term, starting next year? What are going to be the biggest challenges that the state faces from your perspective?
Yeah, well, you're right. We've been talking about these same things for a long time. I recently read, I think it was published in 2004, a paper by our former governor talking about the permanent fund dividend and the 50-50 versus the full PFD and the endowment. And he lays out a long list of solutions that he thinks would be appropriate. And he's talking about, different taxes and different structure in there. And 20 years later, we're talking about all the same issues. I think that it's pretty apparent what the problems are on a macro level for Alaska. So you have declining populations. You have, for most people, like in the interior, over the last 5 or 10 years, their electric bill has doubled. The state's been on a downward trajectory for decades with oil flowing from the pipeline. Now with Venezuela coming on, we're looking at oil possibly in the $45 range. And I know you had a couple esteemed representatives you were playing clips on the other day talking about how they couldn't hardly imagine it getting down to $65 a barrel. So we have declining revenue, and we have a volatile revenue streams, and we don't have, and and even this framing, the way I'm doing it is wrong, because we're talking about it from a government perspective. What does declining revenue mean? It means your economy is shrinking. It means there's not growing jobs and businesses. It means people are moving away. It means that Alaska's not being a place where people want to live and raise family, right? So we're looking at this all wrong. How do we make this a great place to live, where there's new jobs and there's competition in business and the economy is thriving? And we haven't done that in a long time. We've just living on primarily a few oil companies who have slowly moved out one after another, and oil revenue has shrunk. And now we've switched that over to the permanent fund. We'll say, well, we'll just live on this trust fund. And so the last site session, they took 75% of what used to be the dividend, and they spent it on government revenue. And at some point, they're going to spend 100%. And if we don't grow the economy and change the way we do government, pretty soon we're going to be faced with additional taxes and additional cuts. And so we're just going to continue this trend. The trend is government growth and the economy declining, right? And that trend, you have to reverse it. That's unsustainable.
Right. We're talking with Josh Church, candidate for lieutenant governor. That's a good place to take a break. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back. The Michael Duke Show continues. Don't forget, you can join us this morning on Facebook if you'd like. We always do a little talking behind the scenes during the commercial breaks. You can go to facebook.com/Michael Duke Show. You can also go to youtube.com/Michael Duke Show, and even Rumble, wherever you want to go. We're out there. You could join the chat room this morning. We're going to be back with more. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with Josh Church right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. It's just Josh and me and 50 or 60 of our closest friends on the internet. So we're going. Dukes is rumbling. Yeah, I've been on Rumble for a while. I stopped doing Twitch and we're doing Rumble. Not that I don't think that there's, what is there? 5 people watching on Rumble right now. Rumble is not nearly as popular as I think some people think it is, but it's a good choice out there. Josh,
I think you undersell your 50 or 60 online because I bet you there's a lot of people like me that listen to this on podcasts. So,
oh yeah, no. Interestingly enough, this is just a bit of tidbit, just for those of you who are following along at home. I ran the metrics on the podcast the other day, and there was 280,000 downloads of the podcast last year. So the podcast is definitely getting some traction. All the shorts on YouTube, the YouTube shorts are a lot of them are getting between 400 and 800 views for a little 60-second clip, or whatever. So now there's some traction going on out there, but like you said, not everybody's up at 6 o'clock in the morning listening to the old program. The beauty of the podcast, of course, is they can take it with you and do whatever they need to do. Josh, I don't want to get too far astray here while we're in the commercial break, because I want the radio listeners to get in on it. But I think you've hit on something that we've talked about a lot on this program, and that is the fact that, I mean, even you said it. I'm talking about this all wrong. I'm coming at this from the government perspective, but that's where we've been. That's where we've been, Josh. Everything has been about the government perspective. There is no. There's not even, I don't think, hardly a single iota of thought or consideration for what's going on in the private economy. In fact, to many legislators, you heard Kathy Giesel the other day, right? The public economy,
on the private sector.
Yeah, I mean, the public economy is the economy. There is no private sector without government spend. That is the philosophy of many of these people here. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I catch myself because that's how the conversation's been framed for at least a decade. And so I follow, policy, and I'm a numbers guy and stuff. So I look at a budget, and pretty soon I'm saying the same thing. And then I have to catch myself and say, no, wait a minute. This is just one side of the coin, and it's the cart, not the horse. Like, we need to focus on what's actually driving this. The bottom line is, CNBC recently came out with an article saying that, like, Alaska's 50th worst state to do business. You and Rob Myers were talking about it the other way. We pay taxes. People never talk about this. They say, the legislatures get up and say, oh, we want a diverse economy. You got 1% of the land is privately owned, and none of the subsurface rights or none of the mineral rights. So how do you think you're going to have a diverse economy when the government owns everything? Like, what are we talking about here? So you've got to get more resources, and you got to change the way we do business. You got to get more in the hands of the private sector, and then you'll start to have a diverse economy. Then you'll start to have growth.
Well, I mean, I love the comment that Alaskans, we've had it so easy because we haven't had any taxes, right? Government's all paid for. But I mean, that's the thing. We're being taxed. The taxes are all just behind the scenes. I mean, you're a finance guy. How many times does a dollar that's put into the private sector and into the private economy, how many times does it turn versus that same dollar going into the hands of government?
Well, we know ICER's done studies, right? And the tax, if you want to call it that, on the PFD is the least efficient way to do that. And it makes sense because the private sector is the best use of dollars. It grows the most. Government is basically a necessary, inefficient leech on the private sector, right? So then the way I like to think about this is, if you have a small community, you need some cops to keep things safe. And they actually help at a certain level. They help facilitate better business. But there's obviously some sort of ratio. You can't have half of the people in the village be cops. That would be massively inefficient, right? And so there's a ratio where you're paying for government services and they stop being beneficial and they start being detrimental. And Alaska, again, the private sector is tiny compared to the government. So much of the jobs and almost
Yeah.
all of the land and resources is owned by the government.
All right, Josh Church is our guest. We're about to rejoin. Please like and share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Let's get to it. Here we go. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
That's right. Not your daddy, nor do I play him on TV. We're going to be back right now. Lieutenant Governor candidate Josh Church joins us. We're talking about the big issues facing the state. And what I'm getting from your last comment, Josh, is that, the revenues, the taxes, the streams, where government is set up. Are you saying that that's the biggest issue that we're facing right now as a state, and what the next governor is going to be facing?
Yeah, I mean, if we continue being the worst place in the state to do business, if we continue spending the most on education but getting the worst in the nation's results, if we continue to have declining oil flows into the pipeline, if we continue to lock up all our land and resources and slow permitting processes, then what we'll see is, more of the managed decline, where people fly in to do the limited amount of development and then they don't want to live here, so they fly out. And people won't be able to afford retirement here. They won't be able to afford the rising cost of energy, so people will leave. Now, we've got a potential gas line coming in, which is huge for the interior. And if that happens, it'll kick this can down the road a few years, maybe increase government revenue for a couple of years, increase the economy, a boost, $20 to $40 billion into the economy. So that'll be a little blip on the timeline, and we can keep kicking this can down the road. But ultimately, you have to have a growing economy where the government sector is not oversized for the population and the needs.
Well, you have to have a connection between the government and the private economy, the public economy and the private economy. And what we have right now is that there is no connective tissue. There's complete and total disconnect between what's going on in the private economy and the government economy. And that has to do with the fact that the government has been taking from the oil resources directly, and now from the permanent fund directly. And I have to make one correction. You said they took 75% of the earnings. They took 86%. There was only 14% was paid to the dividend. 86% of the earnings. So
you're talking about over the total lifetime, right?
Well, no, I'm talking about this last year. This last year was not a 75% take. It was over 82, 83% was taken when it was all said and done of the draw this last year. So, that's the thing. We moved from a full statutory 5-year rolling average of all the earnings to, we talked about 50-50. We skipped right over 50-50 and went to something else. And then the year before it was 75. And then this last year, it was, again, 82, 83, 84% was taken by the government. So there is no connectivity between what's going on in the private sector, excuse me, and the public sector. It's just, there's no connection because they don't get any money directly from the private sector. So they don't really care about it.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that at all. I'm not sure that I agree with yours and Rob's conclusions that we as conservatives should support a tax. There's lots of states that have high taxes and they have high government. There isn't really a correlation if you do studies across there. And in fact, the correlation is actually, if you want to call any correlation, it's less taxes equal less government in general, because you have less revenue. Where the uniqueness is in Alaska is they figured out a way to get additional revenue because we were set up as more of a socialist state at the time it was set up. So I don't think adding additional government revenue streams like a tax is going to help. I think it's going to hurt the people. The cost of living is already really high to live here, and it's much higher in the interior than it is down where you guys are at. So Matsu's been growing, but Fairbanks has not. Our population's been shrinking.
Right.
So I think you're right in the big framing of the problem, but the solution isn't more revenue streams to government. The solution in the form of another tax. The solution is figuring out a way to hold government from continuing to grow and get more effective use out of government with by restructuring it, and then figuring out a way to get more land and resources in the private sector.
I mean, I want to be clear. The only reason that we've even talked about taxes in this state is because of the growth and size of government and the fact that the revenues are down and that it is so disconnected. I don't want a tax. I don't want any kind of new tax. Yeah, you're right. It's already hard enough to live here as it is. But the problem is that they're going to consume everything. You even said they're going to spend 100% of the permanent fund. And then what's going to happen? I mean, you're already seeing it in this legislative session. What's going to happen? There's going to be taxes anyway. So it's not a question of do you want a PFD or do you want a tax? It is the question, do you want no PFD and what kind of tax? Because that's what's going to happen. And you're right. The only way I would ever support a tax is if there's some kind of spending mechanism that prevents that spending growth. That's what it takes. And that's what we don't have right now.
But you're 100% right. But the frustrating part for me is the solutions are not that hard. They're not that complicated. They might be hard because you have to get people on board, but they're not that complicated. So we can run through just some scenarios and some math real quick. Hopefully we don't lose everybody. But the budget was, the unrestricted budget was roughly $6.5 billion. They took a little bit less than $4 billion out of the permanent draw. So you're at a situation where if we change nothing, you're absolutely right. We're gonna spend all the permanent fund. Then they're gonna either be forced to increase taxes because they're not gonna make cuts. They haven't made cuts in 10 years, and we've all been demanding for it. That hasn't happened, right? You went from a full PFD. We were saying do some cuts. Now this next legislation maybe going to get $500 PFD or something is what the representatives are telling me. So the other solution for them to get revenue is to start backdooring the permanent fund in one form or another. And there's multiple ways where that could happen. But what are some solutions? How could we turn this around? Well, let's just run some numbers. 28% of Alaska is owned by the state government. Roughly 1% to 2% of the state is privately owned. If you sold 1% of Alaska, you get roughly, so you take the states from 28 to 27%. If you were smart about it, nobody will lose any access to parks. You won't notice a difference. You're talking about going from 98.5% to 97.5% of Alaska being publicly owned, right? But yet, if you spread out that land sales of 1% over a decade at $1,000 an acre, which is way lower than what they currently sell them for, you're talking about $400 million direct revenue a year and close to $1 billion of economic activity a year, right? And that's one simple change. And you get, let's talk about another simple change. You guys know this. Brad Keithley was on here talking about it. The permanent fund fees are about $900 million last year, over 1%. The endowments, like similar style endowments across the country, they have an average fee ratio of 0.6%. So you're talking about close to a $300 million savings in just reforming that to get average. But wait, we're twice the size of Yale. We're like the biggest fund in the country of that style. So we actually should be attracting the best managers, and we should be getting, because of the scale, the more money you manage, the lower the fees typically, unless you're getting outsized based performance style funding. So we really probably should be down to 0.3% or more or less to manage that fund. So you're talking about close to like a $600 million savings with reform. Well, then you look at the performance gap between the Yale fund, which is one of the best performing funds, and our fund, which a lot of people get on to say our fund has done really terrible. And it hasn't. It's done pretty good. It's in the top 25% of endowment funds in the nation, which is pretty good. But because of the size and scale, we should probably be in the top 5%. And so if you change, there's a 1.5% performance gap between what Yale's 20-year is and what Alaska's 20-year is. You get a 1.5%, you're talking almost $1.5 billion. So just these three things we've talked about, we're talking over $2 billion change. Another way you can get a couple of $1 billion, you hold government spending flat for 6 years and you grow the economy, the general economy, by 4%, and you get about a $2 billion change, right? So now we haven't been growing the economy, we've been shrinking it, and we certainly haven't been holding government spending flat. We've been demanding cuts, and that hasn't happened. The point is not that it's like a fat kid. You've got a fat kid and you say, go do 5 pull-ups. Well, you can't do it. He's fat. But that 5 pull-ups is not a massively high bar. So you've got to get the government in shape. But what the solutions I'm talking about are not unrealistic. They're totally achievable. We just have to actually get some people to push for some change.
I mean, I like your idea of getting more land into the hands of Alaskans, but the question again becomes, how does that help? I mean, what does that do if all they're going to do is spend it? That's the thing. I mean, more revenues, whether it's through taxation, whether it's through fees, whether it's through the whatever. I mean, if they're just going to spend it, then what how are we going to do it? And they obviously, as you said, they have no appetite for any kind of cuts. In fact, they tell us they just can't cut. No matter what, they can't cut. So what's the solution there?
So I think the solution is, one, you get a governor that follows through. 2, you get a governor that starts to work with the legislature and get small wins and push for changes. So on the end of that timeline, what you hope for, so our borough in Fairbanks, we have an effective spending cap. It actually holds spending down. And when you get a conservative assembly in and they vote to not spend the full amount of the tax cut, it ratchets the number down. So the next year, when this just happened recently, when the next cycle the Liberals take over, they can't spend as much as they wanted to because it got reset to a lower basis because of the cuts of the previous one, right? So Alaska has a spending cap on the books, but it was just really poorly written and it hasn't ever really held spending down. So in the long run, you'd like to see a statewide spending cap. But there are other solutions too to get to the same thing. Florida does a rule where property taxes can't increase by more than the inflation rate, basically, on your primary residence. They can on commercial properties, and they can increase it on rental properties. But your primary residence, the personal the increase in it can't just keep jumping up like it does in Alaska. So there are other measures we could do to sort of ratchet down and hold spending to account. But what can the governor do? Well, the governor has a veto power, and if he chooses to use it, he could be pretty effective. Additionally, Dunleavy recently pushed for agencies to reform their regulatory process and their budget process. He told them to count how many regulations. And so the Department of Commerce has come back and said, hey, we've got 30,000 regulations. Most of the other departments haven't even finished reporting. They don't even know how many rules they have. One of those changes that needs to happen when we get in, we've already put it on our website, bronsonchurch.com, is we're going to require a zero-based budget. And so every one cycle, on the first full year we're in as a governor, we're going to make them do a zero-based budget. The first budget you come out is within a few days of you getting in office, so you can't really affect that. But you have a full year to get the next budget. Now, you don't have to do a zero-based budget every year. That's a lot of work and the agencies don't like it. But from time to time, you should reset. And so we think every 4 years. So we can do that through executive authority the first time, because we're in office and the governor can just say, we're going to do a zero-based budget this year. But then you work with the legislature to get that put into statute, so the next governor is required to. If a great example with this is, as systems get modernized, you go from needing a bunch of plumbers to turn valves and open things to where all the controls are electronic. And now you need people, you need IT guys, but the budget never gets updated because we just take whatever we spent in each department and we add a little bit from the year before. We never have to start from zero and justify all the spending. And so the problem with that is that, one, you have no incentive to cut. You never have to justify anything. Two, you create sort of a slush fund because you have money going to roles that you're not going to fill. You're not going to hire somebody for that role. And so that means that the managers of those departments can use the money for anything they want.
Right. Well, and that's, again, we've talked about that, the PCNs. We couldn't even cut, this vacancies that have been vacant for years. We couldn't even get those cut. So again, no political will to do that. Josh Church is our guest, candidate for lieutenant governor. We're up against the break again, so we're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll continue this in just a moment. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere. Josh Church is our guest. We'll return in just a moment.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Dukes Show.
Okay, continuing now with Josh Church. We'll derail it here, take a sidetrack for just a moment. Ron asks a viable question, especially as the lieutenant governor. He says, taxes aside, as your lieutenant governor, your job will be to fix and manage the voter rolls. How do you plan on doing that? What's your plan on the election situation, integrity, voter rolls, et cetera?
Yeah, so I think people have a sense that there's something wrong, but I don't think people realize how problematic our government is in this area, and maybe in most areas. So if you actually look into it, most people don't know you're allowed to, instead of using a photo ID, you can say, hold up a utility bill. You can hold up your electric bill, and it has Joe Bob's name on it, and you can vote as Joe Bob. People don't realize that counts as voter ID in Alaska, any mail from a utility company or government. So you really don't have to prove you are who you say you are. But then when you dig into it, I think almost no one realizes that Alaska code actually has an exemption where you don't even have to show any ID. Section 15.15.225 of the Alaska code says if the voter refuses to show any form of ID, that he gets to vote on a question ballot. And then if you follow all the links from he gets to vote in a question ballot based on this section of the code to this section. So you jump through all the code and read. What you find is at the end, basically, they sign a statement saying, I promise I'm not lying. That statement goes with the ballot. It goes to a review committee. They look and see, does this name appear on the voter rolls? And if it does, the ballot counts. So there's no voter law in Alaska. No voter is turned away for not voting. And that's before we even talk about, mail-in ballots. So we have a lot of problems with our election law that need to get changed. And so one of the things we'll do is work to change those laws. Internally, there's a lot of things we can fix up too through executive authority. You have the ability as the lieutenant governor to order additional recounts. You have you're the chief executive in this department, so you can help make sure that there's a proper chain of custody of ballots. You don't have there's been allegations of votes showing up in the middle of the night and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do through executive authority to make sure that anytime ballots are open, there's representatives from both campaigns there to watch the process so we can be transparent. But we're going to have to reform election law. We have a real problem in Alaska because our laws are written pretty poorly. And in fact, you might even say some of this is by design. I'm just looking over here. Harvard's got an article published in November of last year, and they talk about it's on the Harvard Law School. and they say that Alaska has served as a laboratory of democracy through election reform intended to temper extremes and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the point is outside money uses Alaska as a laboratory of election reform. So we're their cheap little test bed, and we need to change that. So we've got a lot of really poor laws because of outside money that have come in and influenced our elections.
What about the voter rolls? We know we hear about this 106, 108% of the voting population on the rolls and things like that. And then any time that we talk about clearing those rolls out or purging them, we get a lot of pushback. Is that something that you would want to tackle?
Oh, it absolutely needs to be tackled. And there's some we can do executively, but there's three issues to this problem. One, the last two lieutenant governors, I've talked to them and asked them about this issue. I remember Myers told me nobody commits election fraud, so we don't need to bother looking, right? So the cops, so to speak, in charge of protecting it, don't even look for it. So we need to change that. And I can do that as lieutenant governor. The next two problems to this is the state and the federal laws with it. And those both need to get changed. So, for example, on the state level, any place you go to get government assistance, they'll register you as a voter. When you go to get WICs or SNAPs, those are voter registration places. So is the DMV, so is the Department of Economics and Commerce, so is your PFD. So if there's any incentive to try and get extra money out of the government, you might as well sign up to vote at the same time because they're going to register you there. And in fact, in the PFD, it's easier to register to vote than it is to not, right? So our voter rolls are very problematic and they need to be cleaned up. So we need to change the automatic PFD register. We need to change some of these other agencies that are designated to be voter registrations, voter registrars. We've got something like 40,000 more voters on the voter rolls than we have eligible Alaskans to vote. My sister-in-law lives in the lower 48, and she moved away years ago, and she still gets ballots mailed to her. Right. There's a massive problem here.
We're talking with Josh Church. We're continuing here, the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense, Liberty-Based, Free Thinking Radio.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
I am not. I'm a perfect angel. I don't know what he's talking about. All right, we're continuing here. Josh Church is our guest, and we're talking with him. He's a candidate for lieutenant governor running on the ticket with Dave Bronson. Josh, you said it earlier, growing the private economy, making sure the private economy is healthy and strong. But what, again, we've talked about this disconnect between the public and the private economy. In growing the private economy, how does that help how does that help the state government? Because again, there's no connectivity. They don't care about whether or not the private economy is doing well because they don't receive any of their revenues from the private economy in that regard. So, argue with me as to, how does that help if we grow the private economy, but there's no connective tissue between the two? What does it matter?
Well, the first thing is, if you don't reform government to get the economy working, people will leave the state and the economy will shrink. And then they'll do what they're doing now, which is look around to squeeze a little bit more money. Let's add an extra tax on S corps. Let's look at an income tax. They're reaching around for extra tax bills to shrink and make life harder for families in Alaska. So that's the first part. Second part is I care far less about the government than I care about the people and making this state a great place to live, right? So we need to grow the economy because I want to have good schools for my kids to go to. I want to have good homes and growing communities, not shrinking, dilapidated communities. But the third part is, if you don't get additional revenue flowing and you don't hold down cuts, there are going to be those taxes. But to your point that there's no connection between the the private economy and the government. I fundamentally disagree. I think that that's vastly overstated. The government owns all the land. They own all the mineral rights, right? So most of the money that comes out of this state is from resource extraction and development, right? That's where the money came into the permanent fund. That's still the largest, besides the permanent fund, additional revenue stream is oil taxes, and revenues. So when you grow the economy, what you're talking about is timber sales. You're talking about mining. You're talking about oil. So the government is going to get additional revenue. Now, the big question is, with that additional revenue, do they get the royalties, and then the workers that are developing that fly down and live in Vegas? Or do those workers actually end up saying, hey, this is a pretty good place to live. These schools are doing okay. I can send my kids here, and the cost of homes isn't too high. And there's a homesteading provision that this new government has done. So I can get some free land and I'll build a house and stay here. If we make this place a place that people want to live, then we'll have a growing economy. But if there is a connection between growing the economy and government revenue, and it's downplayed, I think, to far too great a degree.
The biggest issues we're going to be facing in this legislative session, which of course your race is not going to affect because you're going to be next year. But again, the biggest issues we're facing is a question of, more school spending, defined benefits is another one. This combination and combining of the PFD, the permanent fund earnings, and the corpus, and everything else. These are all issues that are going to be faced this year. If you were,
I'm sure they'll be there next year too.
Oh, they may be. Well, I know that the education one will be there until the day I die, so that's not a big question there. But as you look at these things, if you guys were in the hot seat right now, you and Dave were in the hot seat, what would you be advising Dave on with these issues as they come forward on those three to begin with: the education, the defined benefits, and the combining of the funds?
Yeah, we've talked about this stuff a lot, and your show focuses on policies, and everywhere I go, people tell me, don't talk about policies, just talk about your background and vague general platitudes, because that's how you get elected. If you talk about policies specifically, you're going to anger people. So I'm doing everything wrong this show, but we'll see. We believe in being honest, and I think that's part of the problem is people haven't done that. So we have a draft policy that we're looking at running the numbers on right now, where we potentially pay off all of teachers' debt in Alaska as an incentive for them to stay and work 10 years, right? So like a vesting schedule with a retirement, basically, where we'll pay off your teacher's debt. Well, when you run the numbers on it, it looks like it cost about the same amount as the BSA increase last year. So part of the problem, I think, is that people throw more money at a problem without tying it to any specific kind of solution or metrics. It's just generally more money is always the answer. And that's a really poor way to go about things. And so there may be a need for more money in education, but if you're going to do it, figure out a way to do it to improve results. There is really almost no correlation between the level of spending we're doing and better results. We're in the worst in the nation in education and results, and we're spending the most. And you can pass some of that off on the Arctic. You can pass some of that off on our diverse geography. But at a certain point, you have to start saying, hey, maybe we're failing our kids. Maybe we're not doing a good job. So maybe we should look at Alabama and Missouri, who have radically transformed their poor results into some of the best in the country in just a few years. So there are other ways. Let's get back to focusing on reading and math and get some of this other stuff out of the classroom. So education needs massive reform. So absolutely, that needs to happen. As far as the permanent fund, yes, we've been demanding as conservatives for cuts and independents, and they haven't done any cuts, and they've grown government, and they've basically taken all of that money now. That is in most people's mind, that's linked to this endowment question, one fund or two funds. They really should be completely separate issues. The people are suspicious that this is some sneaky way to get more of your permanent fund. And what I'd like people to realize is they already have all of your money. They've reduced it to, 86%, and this next session is going to be lower. So they don't need to do some sneaky thing to get your money out of it. That's not the issue. So what is the issue between one fund or two fund? To some extent, it's an accounting gimmick because they invest them as if they're the same, supposedly. I don't know how you do that. That doesn't make sense to me as a money manager, because if I know you might take a big chunk of it out, I have to change my investments a little bit to be ready so we don't get completely just crushed when the market is down. So I think that's part of the drag on performance. And so some of the professionals, some of the people that are looking at that, they think, hey, if we combine it and we have a fixed rate, whether that's 4% or 4.5% or 5% or whatever the fixed rate is, now we know what's going to come out. And so that makes it more predictable. It doesn't solve the debate of how much of that 4% revenue goes to PFD or goes to government. But what it does is it allows the revenue stream going into government to be predictable, right? We'll still have that fight until we get it into the Constitution of what your dividend will be. But we can at least solve the predictability of the rate that government's going to pull money out of that fund. The other thing that people miss with this is they think by not combining the fund, they're protecting the principal. And that's because they're afraid if the investments underperform inflation, that will slowly be drawing down the principal. What they forget is the existing ERA is not protected. They can pull that money out at any time. So when you combine the funds, you increase the number that's protected. And the other thing they forget is even the main permanent fund, there's a backdoor way that the legislature can get at that money. They could put pressure on the managers to sell something and have a realized gain. And then that realized gain goes into the earnings reserve. So if the legislatures get to a point where they're hurting for money enough, there might be pressure on the managers to sell good investments early to provide cash into the ERA. And so there's a real risk in either scenario of depleting the fund principal if it's not managed well.
All right, Josh Church is our guest. We're out of time, unfortunately. Josh, thank you so much for coming on board. We appreciate you being part of it. Hold the line for just a second here. We're going to continue this over the top of the hour. We'll be back in hour 2. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. All right, I want to poke into this a little bit harder here. Here's my problem with the combining of the permanent fund, and you've touched on it. The earnings of the fund and the corpus of the fund. The corpus of the fund is protected, and as you said, there could be some workaround where they try and pressure, but there's no guarantee. As of right now, the corpus of the fund is protected, unless there is some kind of language in a combining effort on their constitutional amendment, which up until now hasn't been. They could, with that new constitutional amendment of combining the funds, they could overdraw the main corpus of the fund. And what this does, this is not about protecting the fund. This is about protecting the spend. This is about them having access to the maximum amount that they can spend no matter what. So no matter what the fund does, they can draw up to their maximum and keep drawing it out year after year. And that's the main concern.
I mean, Brad already admitted to it. And the solution to this is really easy. You just say, hey, the revenue is 4.5%, the draw is 4.5%, which is common across all endowment funds. It's really easy to grow the fund at a rate like that. So you make your draw reasonable, and then you say, or the lesser of the actual earnings over the last 5 or 10 years. And so I've already drafted language that says that. And Brad Keithley said on your show a while back that he would support that kind of a change. So it's an easy solution to make that fear go away. And so we have something drafted. I sent it to Bruce Tangeman. He looked it over and he likes it. I sent it to Bart LeBon. He likes it. That's a workable solution. You're right. It is, for the legislature, it is about protecting the permanent revenue for government. But some of the legislature people, they want to protect that for perpetuity, right? So they don't want to destroy the permanent fund because they want that revenue. It's not about protecting the permanent fund dividend because they've already stolen that. That's a separate fight. But it is about protecting the long-term revenue stream, right? And so there's a way to do that. Endowment funds do this all across the country. It's pretty simple to make this sustainable, where we have that revenue protected for the long term. And then you and I can have the fight of, now that we have an efficient fund protected for the long term, how do we get the dividend back? And the way to do that is hold government spending down and grow the economy and grow the fund with better performance.
Well, and I admire the fact that you, I mean, again, drafting legislation that says it protects the corpus of the fund, but the problem is that's not what's being proposed right now. And even though
what's being proposed right now needs work.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the problem. What they have right now would crack the walnut of the corpus and give them access to it. And that's
Right.
the problem. You and I can agree that yes, that would be a good solution if we could do that and protect it. But the problem is that's not what the powers that be are trying to put forward.
But most likely they won't get anything through this time because they usually don't. And then if you guys vote for me and Mayor Bronson for governor, we'll put forward some better legislation. And these are solvable problems.
I'll give you the final word here. We got about 2 minutes. I'll give you the final word to summate, wrap up, and give folks on the podcast something to think about here.
Alaska is facing a big fiscal and economic stagnation crisis and a crisis of performance. The government doesn't work for people, but none of these problems are so insurmountable that with the right people, we can't change it. Personnel is policy. And if you get the right people in, these problems get a lot smaller. They are solvable.
I have so many questions at this point. Well, because again, I want to go back to that connectivity with the discussion of expanding the private economy. But as you said, if we get land in and then land can do it, but again, your focus was more on the resource development side of it. And that is some monies that come in. But again, that just goes back to that one leg of the stool that we're talking about. It just feeds into the resource leg. We've got resource, we've got government, and then the private economy is the most anemic leg of the whole stool. I mean, I don't know. We got 90 seconds here. Can you give me an answer again more about how we connect that in a better way so that they have a vested interest in getting the private economy rolling?
We spend more than any other state in the country. We have the highest state and local government spending, right? So the problem isn't a lack of revenue. It's a lack of discipline and a lack of good policy for how we spend that revenue, right? So we've got to change. So government funding creates better schools, creates better roads. We have some of the worst infrastructure. So we need to look at changing how government works. It's not a problem that there's not enough money flowing from the private sector to the government sector. That's not the issue. Yes. If you had a big broad-based tax, there would be a more direct revenue flow, but there's enough revenue flowing from the private sector. The problem is that the people in politics don't care about the private sector. So you've got to change the people, like your charter changes, and you've got to change some of the structural operations so that way we get better results.
Josh Church, our guest here, the Michael Duke Show. Thank you so much, Josh, for coming on board. As always, informational and educational. Thank you for being part of it today. We look forward to talking to you again here in the future. Thanks for coming on board.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that brings us to the next segment of the show. We're going to hit some headlines, have some discussions, and see exactly what comes of all this. I still have some questions here on this. We're going to continue this discussion in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Here we go. Hour 2 is dead ahead.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the program. It is hour 2 of the Monday edition of it is the fastest 2 hours in radio. I mean, it just doesn't get any faster than that. We just finished up with Josh Church, who is running for lieutenant governor on the ticket with David Bronson. And I say, let's see, I'm gonna let me give him a grade here, right? I'm gonna give him a solid B on his appearance here on the program. I think that he had some good answers for a lot of things. I'm still a little confused on the discussion about bolstering the private economy and how that effectively would benefit the government at this point. Because again, there's very little. Now he focused on resource development. When I asked him that question, he said he wanted to expand the private economy and get the private economy rolling again. Which again, there's no impetus, there's no incentive really for the legislature to do that right now. There's no reason. They could give two craps about whether or not the private economy is doing well, because they don't receive really any of their revenue from the private economy outside of of resource development. Right, that's the one leg of the private economy that they get their resources from. So if there's something affecting resource development, then they're all about that. The rest of the economy can go straight to hell. They don't care. There's just no. So first we have an incentive problem, right? There's no reason, because even if the economy was booming, healthcare, hospitality, tourism, whatever else, even if all of those parts of the economy were booming, what does it do for me as government, right? It does nothing. And that's my problem. And again, this is why we've been talking about whether or not some form of broad-based tax will work. I don't want a tax. I don't want a tax. But the question is, if that's the only way to get government to be more interested in what's happening in the private economy, and get the private economy paying attention to what's happening in government, that's part of the problem, right? That's part of the problem right there. Rob Myers in the chat room said the state likes it when the economy shrinks because it leaves more money for them to spend. That's true. I mean, if there's less constituency to have to spend money on, then they can do other things with that money that they may not have done in the past. But I'm looking for a more solid. I mean, I agree that the private economy needs. This is why people are leaving, and this is why you're seeing that most of the people that are leaving the state are from that working class. You've got the biggest influx is from people who are already moneyed and retired. The older that sector is actually growing. Yet when you look at it and the net outflow, it's all people who are in their working years, that middle income kind of working year, because they're the ones that are getting squeezed out because they don't benefit from any of the social safety net. welfare style state programs, and they're not high enough on the food chain to benefit from any kind of government spending, or programs. So they're the ones that are getting squeezed out. So if we grow the economy, which we need to keep citizens in and do, if we grow the economy, there's got to be some kind of connectivity back to government in some way, shape, or form. And to top it all off, the cornerstone of everything that we've been talking about has to include a real solid spending cap, some kind of governor on the size and scope of government. Because this legislature in the past 25, 30 years of legislators have proved that they do not have the political will to do it themselves. They just don't have it. They just don't have an interest in it. Again, we're talking about incentives, right? We're talking about what incentivizes them to do one thing or another. Well, up until this point, they've been incentivized to keep the permanent fund and protect the permanent fund, and to keep the oil taxes where they're at, because that's where their bread is buttered. That's where they're getting all their revenue from. It used to be a lot more came from the oil companies. Now it's down to 20 something percent, with the vast majority of it coming out of the earnings of the permanent fund itself. So the vast majority comes from the revenue generated by the permanent fund, with another 20% or so sprinkled in from resource development and oil revenues. And they just have not been incentivized to change anything about that. That's why they were talking about wanting to get the fund to $100 billion. Because if they get the fund to $100 billion, well, they can spin off $5 billion a year on that, and it's all gravy. Until, of course, they grow it up and beyond that amount, which again, they will. Again, if you look at the governor's 10-year forecast that he's been putting out for the last 4 or 5 years, it shows, even with their rosy assumptions on the size and scope of government, it shows that they continue to grow beyond the rate of inflation, and it shows that they continue to be in the red every year moving forward. And even if you take out the full PFD and everything else, there's still not enough money to make it work. So, even after, and as Josh said, they're going to take all of the PFD. They're going to take it all. There will be nothing left. And then they'll look at you straight in the eye and tell you, well, free ride's over. Free rides die hard. It's time for you to pay your fair share of government. That's, and quite honestly, maybe that's what it's going to take. Maybe it's going to take a complete and total loss of the PFD, and then for them to apply some form of taxation on us, for the electorate to kind of wake up as to what's going on, and for them to start caring about what's happening in the private economy, because now they're connected to it in some way, shape, or form. That's the problem. That's where we're at right now. So again, I think a pretty solid performance by Josh. Again, I don't think that his answer about connecting the public and the private economy really works, because again, it was focused more on the resource development side of it, which I agree needs to happen. I like the idea of getting more land into the hands of Alaskans, but again, that's just a minor step in the overall private economy. Even if you sold people, they bought a bunch of land, or they got a bunch of land and they were timber and everything. We still don't have the mineral rights, right? We still don't have the subsurface rights, but you could do timber and a few other things, but that's not the full economy. That goes back to the resource curse. the full economy of this overall. And it's frustrating. At least he talked about at least he did talk about that the revenues and the budgets, that this is, one of the biggest issues. And I mean, I'm at least happy for that. It wasn't, and even he said it. I think he must have been listening to the program last week when he said that they say that we're not supposed to talk about policy. We're just supposed to talk about our history or family history or where we come from and everything else, and not to make everybody mad. You know what? I know that probably Joe Q Public doesn't care about the policy issues, doesn't care about a lot of the details, and just wants to be spoon-fed the pablum of, oh, well, I just want to hear about him. I don't want to get down to you're going to make somebody angry. That's the thing. You're going to upset somebody. That means you're also going to inspire someone else, right? Somebody, if you lay out a piece of policy, yes, you're going to find people who oppose that policy or who are upset by that policy. But on the other side, you're going to find people who are inspired by that policy or appreciate or like that policy. That's, so you can't, and I know everybody's going for the same 15%, right? Oh, I'm just shooting for 15% of the electorate so that I can get past this stupid jungle primary thing. And then I can tell you what my real plan is. Once I get past the primary, then I can tell you what my real plan is. Until then, everything is kind of amorphous and, I think the issues are housing and this and the other thing. The number one issue facing this state is budgetary because it touches on everything out there. And the longer they delay this, the longer that they delay and don't talk about it and avoid it and everything else, the more people who are going to leave because they just can't afford it. Comments from the chat room this morning. Sourdough Steel says, my family is ready to hit the road with this place. It's getting less and less affordable to live here. We don't use hardly any of these quote unquote services that we pay for. What's the incentive to stay? Brian says, my kids are considering leaving, not a lot of good jobs or opportunity for growth. The state is slowly detaching people from the notion of Alaska. And I've heard the same thing. I've heard a lot of people who have said, especially again, that working age population who are saying, this is a huge struggle to even make a living here and I could go somewhere else, even with taxes and whatever else that they have, and do better. And the more we hear things like that, the more rapid the exodus is going to be, especially, again, of those working age Alaskans who are leaving the state. Kim replies to Brian and says, half of my kids and grandkids have left, and it's sure been hard. I can't imagine. I mean, again, what is left in this state if we continue to bury the private economy under the spending of government? We're spending more than any other state in the nation. Rob corrected my numbers the other day. I kept saying 18,000 and change. It's like with the federal state, it's like $22,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state. $22,000. So it's you and your spouse, that's $44,000. It's you and your 4 kids, that's $88,000 a year in government spending on your behalf. What are you getting for your $88,000 a year for you and your 2 kids and your spouse? Right? I'm not saying that we don't need government, in some form for certain things, but the question is, are you getting good value for your dollar? And I would argue that the answer to that is no. I got 5 people living in my house right now, $110,000 a year in revenue. That's almost more than I make, right? $110,000 a year in state spending for my family. When they are spending more in state government than you are actually earning, then you there's a problem here. There's a huge problem. And of course, there's no political will to get any of that done. Rob made a comment here a while ago. He said the first step in solving a problem is wanting to solve it. A large segment of our politicians and voters don't want to solve it because they benefit from the current system. And that's 100%. And we talked about this last week. When you've got 45+% of the working age of the working population of employment is being employed or benefiting in one level or another from that government spend, either from working for government directly or contracting. And again, that doesn't include people who are on some kind of welfare or social safety net stuff. They don't want to rock that boat because that's the nobody stopped my gravy train. That's definitely part of the problem. Josh says, my brother left a few years ago because it was too hard for him and he had a good job working for a bank in Anchorage. He also had 2 part-time jobs on the side as well. And you can only do that for so long, right? I'm too old to do that kind of stuff anymore. But I used to do that when I was younger. I had 2 or 3 jobs at the same time. That's the problem. All right, we're going to continue here. I've got some headlines and some other stuff to get into. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Dukes Show.
Okay. All right, let me get back over here to what you guys want to talk about here. Okay. Fat Ray says, I use that stupid intersection they put in at airport going on to Fort Wainwright and those overpasses that were put in that no one asked for that I know of. I guess that counts as me using the services. Yeah. Boy, I tell you what, the last time I was in Fairbanks and I was looking at that intersection and I'm like, wow. I mean, a roundabout would have been, when a roundabout would have been better and simpler, you know that that's a tough situation right there for sure. Absolutely. What kind of life is that, says Brian? 3 jobs and no family life. I mean, yeah. I mean, I feel that. If you have to hold down 2 or 3 jobs simply to survive, that isn't living. It's a form of slavery. You know, if you're doing it in the short term, yeah, I could see that. I mean, and I didn't have to do that for a whole lot of time. I did it for a couple years just to get us through when Terry and I first got married. But, you know, after that, I was able to you know, to bootstrap myself up. But if that's what you're doing today and it's an all day, everyday thing, yeah, again, that's not living. Ms. Miguel says, again, my question will always be, how do they, the legislators, do their own home budgets? Do they spend more at home than they take in? Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm just scrolling backwards here. Chris says, my daughter is planning to leave Alaska within a year. That's not what we want to hear as parents, man. It's not. I know my son at one point talked about wanting to go down to moving down to Washington, and I'm like, that's not what we want to hear. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Sybil says policy is important. If you can't talk about how, why you propose to budget, how and why, I guess how and why. Yeah. I mean, again, this idea that somehow politicians shouldn't talk about policy because you might make somebody angry. I mean, I just, somebody's got to have the courage to step up and say, this is my plan. Well, they should just wait until after then they can get through the primary, and then they can unleash. Oh, geez. I mean, come on. I'm scrolling backwards here. No, I mean, I think Josh got a solid B on that discussion. I don't agree with everything that he said, obviously, and I really want a better answer when we come back to tying the public and the private economies together. What's the answer? Rob also said the problem with the FNSB cap, the tax cap in Fairbanks, is that it was put in by the voters. The state constitution doesn't allow for initiatives to amend the Constitution. So yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem for sure. My friend at the Alaska Study Industry said, we here at the Alaska Study Industry will gladly contract with the state to analyze the situational perspectives as identified. Yes, I know you will. Sourdough says, again, why stay? I have a good job too, but when the weather already kicks your butt for 8 months, the price of groceries kicks even harder. Why not look literally to greener pastures? This state gives us zero incentives to stay. Yeah, that's there you go. All right. Well, we're going to piddle around with some of the headlines here, and we'll get going on that. Please like and share, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y things. Let's get to it.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay. So we finished up with Josh Church. If you missed that interview, by the way, which I think was a solid, good interview, you can go back and listen to that on the podcast. It's available wherever you find podcasts, including my favorite, Spotify. You can go out there and listen to it out there. Suzanne Downing over at the Alaska Story has put out a listicle from Friday. There was a major bill surge on Friday where a whole bunch of legislation was filed with the AK leg. And that included budget bills and constitutional amendments and land development authority, tax policy, agency oversight, public safety measures, healthcare reforms, and economic development initiatives. And there was a whole, I don't know, what is this, 30 bills, 25, 30 bills. So the governor introduced his full framework for what he is considering his fiscal plan, his fiscal policy, which I'm sure Brad's going to take a moment to get into, and I'm sure he'll dive down into that and go through it all. HB 263 is the operating budget with amendments and supplemental appropriations. HB 264 is the capital budget. And then HB 265 is the mental health trust budget. And these are now all moving into House Finance and will begin formal negotiations for this upcoming fiscal year, which starts on the 1st of July. Then we've got two companion bills that were filed by the governor. These are the constitutional amendments to amend so that the permanent fund is structured in that 50-50 way. The HJR 30 is the House version of the constitutional amendment, and SJR 23 is the Senate version of that same amendment. Again, the governor went through a whole lot of stuff, right, of what he wants and what he wants to get done. Then we've got some structural reform bills. Again, Dunleavy doing most of the heavy lifting on this. He's got HB 274 with the companion bill SB 222. And this is the state agency review by the LBNA committee, expanding legislative oversight authority. He's got an appropriations limit bill, which establishes a statutory spending cap framework. Again, statutory, not constitutional. I haven't read the details of it yet, but we'll get into that. Again, as we've said on this program time and time again, the cornerstone of any major reform in state government right now is going to require a very strong and rigid spending cap framework. Now, we also have said that that's going to have to be a constitutional spending cap, because that's the only way that the legislature won't bust it, because we already know that the legislature is not constrained by statute. They will do what they want to do. The legal precedent has said that they're not restrained by one statute because one legislator can't bind over another. Only through a constitutional spending cap can we hold that back. But we'll see what HB 274 or SB 223, which is the companion bill, we'll see what the language looks like, but it needs to be a strong and rigid spending cap. The governor's also put out a public land sale, lease, and commercial development authority bill, HB 276, and also made comprehensive updates to trust law, trust proceedings, and trustee governance. Then you come to the resource development and energy and land use. Again, Dunleavy doing a lot of the heavy lifting here with 4 different bills. They all collectively address resource access, energy infrastructure, and land use authority. There's the big game hunting permit bill, a tax policy for electrical cooperatives, generation, and energy storage. And then, it was coming. The kitchen lights unit royalty modification. That's Cook Inlet gas. That was the deal where they were going to modify the royalties for, was it for Hex, Blue Fury, Hex or Fury? Anyway, he's proposing a royalty modification for the kitchen lights unit, which gives them a tax break, essentially a royalty break. And then the one bill from House Rules Committee, they put out an apportionment of taxable income for digital businesses. I think this is a revamp of SB 113, which failed to get overridden, by the way, on Thursday. We didn't talk about that on Friday. That vote failed. In fact, they got 42 votes, I think, the first time that it went through. They got 35 on the override. So I don't think everybody was buying what Wielechowski was selling on this unicorn tax bill, the one that makes the government all this money and doesn't cost anybody anything. But we'll see what the new one does. And then there's again, taxation and revenue policy, the appropriation limit bill, electrical generation and storage tax framework. And then we get through a slew of bills from legislators. Tomaszewski's got a opioid overdose drug prescription access bill. Rep. Josephson's got an insurance coverage for prosthetics and orthotics. Representative Ruffridge has a bill for dental insurance and direct care agreements. Representative Schwanke has a vaccination requirements and information disclosures bill. And then Dan Sadler's got a mandatory use of headlights bill. That's just what we need. Legislator telling us how we should. I mean, I lived on Kanickos Bay Road for 10 years. That was a highway safety corridor, which meaning by law, you're supposed to have your headlights on all the time. good luck enforcing that. I mean, just good luck. And then House Rules has a bill in to talk about the number of Superior Court judges. And then Mia Costello she's got an economic development and international trade bill. She's got a bill that establishes the Alaska-Ireland Trade Commission, creating a formal economic development and trade relationship framework. I mean, okay. I just, I don't know exactly, unless it's Irish whiskey. I really don't know what, I just really don't know what we're going to be, what kind of trade are we going to be doing with Ireland? And I guess my bigger question to this, not that I'm opposed to it per se, but what does it cost us? I mean, we're creating a formal economic development and trade relationship framework. What does that mean? What does that mean? And then there's some resolutions. Rep. Eichheit has got a bill supporting the Kids Online Safety Act. House Fisheries has put together a resolution calling for a ban on Russian seafood. Ashley Carrick has got a bill for recognizing the Declaration of Independence anniversary. And then Rep. St. Clair's got a bill recognizing the 250th anniversary of the United States, because this 4th of July is the 250th 4th of July. So there's been more 4th of Julys than that, but you know what I mean. It's the 4th of Independence Day. So those are just the bills that have come up since Friday, and we're going to have to dive down into them. And I didn't take the time this weekend to go through it because it's Friday, and you know what? It was the weekend and I didn't care. I saw enough of what was going on out in the world, the madness that was happening in the world over the weekend. And I'm probably going to give you just a little bit of that here in just a minute, because I do want to talk briefly about this thing that happened in Minnesota. And we'll see what comes of that. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. But yeah, that's kind of where that's all the bills. Again, I think this is going to be a very interesting legislative session, because again, now we're starting to see where the rubber's going to hit the road, and where these guys and gals, these legislators are going to have to come up with some solutions to the problems that they've created. And I'm looking forward to seeing where that leads. I really, really am. All right, we got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Hour 2. Don't forget, again, check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show. Also, don't forget, if you want to help support the show, you can become a member of the Common Sense Corps. For as little as $3 a month, you can help support the show. Go to patreon.com/Michael Duke Show. Or you can go to michaeldukeshow.com and just click on Join the Corps. That's how you do it right there. Back with more right after this. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes on Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Frank just said 10 cents a day to support Dukes. I mean, yeah, that's about right. $3 a month if you want to help support the show. It's a one way to do it. I mean, it's and I do want to welcome David Boyle. He became a member of the Common Sense Corps, and I saw that Donna rejoined the Common Sense Corps as well. And we've got our own little private Facebook group out there and everything else. It's a fun thing. It's a fun thing. Okay. Sorry, I was just looking here. Naresh Sorry, I'm going back. Trying to read all of what Naresh has got a book here. Actual numbers for 2025, fiscal year 27, about 3.5 billion over 21K employees, total budget, 4.8 billion. So 73% of the general funds goes to PS. That's no one asked about this question in House Finance. OMB presented the governor's budget, and these numbers are in the budget. Okay. I'm scrolling backwards. Which bill is that? Says Barbara. I don't know what bill you're talking about, Barbara. That was 4 minutes ago, and there's a whole bunch of them. You tell me which bill it is, and I will, and I'll tell you which one it was. Michael, do you know if Ben has made any headway in getting Oversight Live up and running? I worked with him a bit on Thursday and then on Friday, and I'm hoping that he has everything. I'm hoping that he has everything put together by today. That's the hope. You should. I know that he started to try and do a broadcast. There's a restriction on Facebook where he can't. He has to have his Oversight Live page up for 60 days before he can stream to it, which is just stupid, but it is what it is. So I think he's going to stream to his personal Facebook page in the beginning for Oversight Live. So if you are friends with Ben Carpenter, or if you can find Ben Carpenter on Facebook, that's where I think he's going to be streaming. And I think his YouTube stream should be now up and available for streaming. So hopefully, fingers crossed, today you'll start seeing that. But we'll see. All right. On the KSRM talk show Sound Off, a previous mayor was talking about the borough's budget. I called in and told him, you don't have a budget, and what you do have goes through my bank account. He hung up on me. I guess he didn't like the truth. Yeah, well, it's hard sometimes when you throw him the truth right here. Okay, I was back to where we were. Frank was asking about one of Prox's bills. Oh, personnel services. Okay, sorry. I don't know. Prox's bill is not listed in this. This was just the bills that were. This is just the bills that were filed on Friday. So there you go. With the challenges we're facing as a people of the state of Alaska, thank the Lord we have people at the Capitol working on a headlight bill. Why do people continue to vote for these imbeciles? I mean, right? I mean, at some point I'm like, okay. And I actually did read that one because I was curious. I went in and read it, and I'm like, this is already, I mean, you can't fix stupid, folks. You just can't. I mean, if somebody's going to drive without their headlights on an hour before or an hour after sunset, and they're going to drive around in that low light without headlights. I mean, I just set mine to automatic, right? That's what I do. Because I get tired of futzing around with it. But I don't know why we need to pass another law on top of it. Apparently we have to do something. All right. Common Sense Core is on Bookspace. Facebook is what he's talking about. I can't or won't Bookspace. Okay, that's fine. It's all good, man. You don't have to. You can join the Common Sense Core. It's not on Facebook. I mean, there is a private Facebook page, but you can be a member of the Common Sense Core without having a Facebook page. It's not a requirement, right? Just go to Patreon right here, and you can sign up if you want. The Facebook page is just kind of a bonus. So if you don't want to be on Facebook, that's okay. Yeah. All right. The first thing I think about when I hear, okay, I'm going to actually read this on the other side. Hold the line, because that's a good one. That's a good one. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
That guy is so mean to me. All right. We're continuing here. I did want to read Richie's comment because I thought it was hysterical. We're talking about the headlight bill Dan Sadler put forward, and I'm just like, I mean, he says, the first thing I think about when I hear about a headlight bill is a suburban Karen hopped up on Chardonnay and Xanax patrolling the neighborhood. I mean, it almost feels that way, right? I mean, look, I'm the guy who will flash somebody in low light who's driving without their headlights on. And if they turn them on, great. And if not, okay. I mean, you're taking your life into your own. I just don't know why we need another law about that. I mean, is it just a revenue measure for the state? Is it really to make us safe? Is it? I mean, again, I lived on KGB, Knik Goose Bay Road, and there were signs along the roadway that, you know, this is a highway traffic safety corridor. Headlights must drive with headlights at all time. It didn't. I drove past state troopers that didn't have their headlights on. Right? And I don't know. Anyway, it's just one of those things. It's just one of those things. All right. Where are we? We're in the final segment. Dang, how did we get here so quick? Final segment of the show today. And I think it's interesting to see that what the governor came out with. He on his State of the State, and we're starting to see some of these things. Like I said, we saw on Friday, we saw all these bills, although his new seasonal sales tax bill did not make it into the bill dump on Friday. He is introducing a temporary seasonal sales tax concept, he calls it. And essentially, it would generate it would create a seasonal sales tax that would waver between 2% and 4%, depending on whether it's in the on season or off season. The tourism season during the summer, it would be 4%. During the winter, it would be 2%, and it would be temporary. It would have a built-in sunset clause into it, that it would sunset within 5 years. Now, A for effort on that part, A for effort on putting a sunset into a revenue bill. The question is, will the legislature follow through on that? I mean, if it does get adopted in 5 years, and let's just say, he said that the plan that he's putting together would generate $1.6 billion in revenue. Now, not all of that obviously is coming from his proposed tax. Must be a big chunk of it. But so, I mean, let's just, cut it in half. Say it's $800 million from the tax side of it. Do you really think that in 5 years the legislature is going to be willing to pull the plug on an $800 million revenue stream? I mean, history tells us something completely different, right? Now, I mean, again, A for effort on the governor's part for putting a sunset clause. Every revenue measure in the state should have some kind of sunset clause on it because we should go back and revisit it. It shouldn't be just an easy set it and forget it thing. But I digress. So we'll see what this sales tax look like. Maybe it'll come out today. Maybe we'll hear more on it. But as of right now, there's we don't have the details on it other than we know that it's a 2 to 4% sales tax with a sunset clause. And that is I mean, I guess that's good. We're at least going to have the discussion, which I think is important here. We should at least have the discussion on it. But we'll see. Nothing is temporary with taxes, says Sybil. Yeah, I mean, it's, again, if we can get a sunset and we can do it, then I'm all for it. It's a tax stream. It's not a revenue stream. It's a tax stream. It's money. It's money out of your pocket, one way or the other. All right. Well, let's get into my final point of today, my final topic of today. What do we got? We got about 5 minutes here. So Saturday morning, I was up and I was in the studio. I was piddling around, doing my daily busy work for the radio stations. Yes, it's a 7-day-a-week job. It is what it is. But usually on the weekends, I only have about an hour or so work every day that I have to do to make sure everything's up and running and do all that kind of stuff. And I just happened to be there when I saw the thing pop up on the latest headline in Minneapolis that there was another shooting by ICE agents. Now, we've had the conversations about the Renee Good shooting and how I from watching all the different videos and everything else, I've taken the stance that I think it was a legitimate shooting, but at the same time, I worry about the situational that I think it could have been de-escalated in a better way. Okay. I think there's plenty of blame on both sides on that one. But I think in the end, it was a legitimate situation because she did strike the officer with her car. So, I mean, it is what it is. This last shooting, which the Border Patrol came out in their on X, they came out with a tweet that said something along the lines of this guy was armed and he was coming to shoot up a bunch of ICE officers and everything, which having watched this from about 5 or 6 different angles, I can tell you right now that I'm very concerned about the legitimacy of this shooting. I'm very concerned about what is going on in these situations and the potential for escalation on both sides. From every angle that I could see and everything that this is just my initial take on it. I just want to throw it out there. It appeared that this man was resisting arrest or resisting being detained, which is, again, it's a strike against him for the resisting. But it did not appear to me that he was reaching for a firearm. He was a concealed carry holder. He did have his firearm on him. He had his cell phone in his hand, nothing else. And he was down on his knees, hands and knees, all fours, and they were struggling on the ground. Now, one officer disarmed him, and you could see a video of the officer pulling the firearm out and walking back from the crowd with that firearm, walking it off before the shot goes off. So that means that he, at the time, was not armed when he was shot. And it really worries me, this whole escalation. And again, remember we talk about using the substitution game all the time when we're talking about the Second Amendment. How about we substitute the First Amendment for the Second Amendment when you're talking about restricting things and all. So I like to use the substitution game in this case as well, just as a thought experiment. What if it wasn't ICE? What if it was ATF? What if it wasn't protesters against, illegal immigration? What if it was a Second Amendment protester? Right? We all need to really step back and take a look at this for what it is, and really analyze what's going on. And we need to de-escalate this a little bit. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is, but it is. But the answer has to include some form of de-escalation. Fat Ray in the audience just said, "Didn't see that video, huh? Didn't see that video." I was on X for an hour on Saturday, scrolling through all the different, because there was people all around in almost a 360-degree circle around where this incident had, and they were all filming. So you can find 5, 6, 7 different angles of this incident, and my initial reaction on the first shooting, the Renee Good shooting, was that it was legitimate. Again, I said it was problem, but it was legitimate. This one, I don't believe it was. Now, there's plenty of blame to go around. Again, Tim Waltz and company and everybody else encouraging people to go out and march violently and all this other kind of. There's plenty of blame. He shouldn't have resisted when they tried to take him down to put him in custody. There's plenty, but that does not alleviate the responsibility of these guys from protecting his constitutional rights, including the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It's troubling. The whole thing is troubling because I can see this blowing up into something much greater than it needs to be. I'm hoping that cooler heads can prevail, but we'll have to see it. We'll have to see it from there. All right, we got to go. We will see you guys tomorrow. I'm sure we'll have a discussion about this on Friday. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back tomorrow with Brad Keithley and Chris Story. Be kind, love one another, live well. Yeah, no, I was originally concerned about the Renee Good shooting until I saw where he was actually struck by the vehicle. Ended up having some internal injuries on that. But this, again, it was right up until the point to where I saw the video of the officer disarming him and walking away from the melee with the guy's pistol in his hand. The pistol that was later shown that the Border Patrol later showed a picture of. It's pretty distinctive. And so, yeah, I'm concerned. I'm just concerned. All right. We will continue tomorrow. You guys be kind. Love one another. Live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.